Stop doing this after dinner. It may be keeping your arteries inflamed all night. Most people think the damage is in the dinner. They blame the steak, they blame the dessert, they blame the pizza, they blame the carbs, the fat, the salt, and sometimes they are right. But this is where the story gets more interesting. Because for a lot of people, the bigger problem is not just what happens at dinner, it's what happens right after dinner. The habit I would question hardest is this: finishing dinner and then becoming completely sedentary for the rest of the night. Sitting on the couch, reclining in a chair, watching TV for hours, scrolling on the phone, snacking a little more, barely moving until bed. That sounds harmless. It feels normal. And that is exactly why it becomes dangerous. Because the medically honest version of this title is not that your arteries literally catch fire every night. It's that going motionless after dinner can keep your body in a more stressful post-meal state for longer. Higher glucose, higher triglycerides, worse vessel function, and more of the kind of metabolic strain that pushes the arteries in the wrong direction over time. And this matters even more after 50. Because after 50, the body usually becomes less forgiving of the exact pattern most people normalize. A large dinner, then hours of sitting, then sleep. If you want the simplest takeaway early, it's this: the problem is not just dinner. The problem is dinner followed by stillness. And if that's your routine, stay with me. Because I want to walk you through why this matters, what it may be doing to your arteries, and what to do instead. The first thing to understand is that your arteries don't just respond to food. They respond to the aftermath of food. Most people imagine that once dinner is over, the story is over. It's not. After you eat, your body enters a postprandial state. Blood sugar rises. Insulin rises. Triglycerides begin to circulate. The body has to process nutrients, store some of them, move glucose into cells, and deal with the lipid load from the meal. All of that is normal. The problem is when this process becomes exaggerated and prolonged, especially night after night. This is where people miss the real issue. A heavy dinner followed by total inactivity creates the exact environment in which that post-meal surge lingers longer than it should. Glucose stays more elevated. Lipids stay circulating longer. And the blood vessels don't love that. High-fat meals and high glucose spikes have both been linked with short-term endothelial stress, and endothelial dysfunction is one of the earliest signs that the arteries are not responding the way they should. That sounds technical, but the idea is simple. Your arteries are not rigid pipes. They are living tissues. They expand, respond, signal, and regulate blood flow. When the inner lining of those vessels is repeatedly stressed by high post-meal glucose, high triglycerides, and inflammatory signaling, the vascular system starts aging faster than people realize. And this is exactly where the after-dinner habit matters. Because going straight from the dinner table to the couch tells the body, handle this entire meal load passively. No muscle demand, no meaningful glucose clearance, no movement support. Just process it all while I sit here. That is not the part people expect. Most people think exercise only counts if it's a real workout. They imagine a treadmill, a gym, a long walk, sweating, effort. But after dinner, even modest movement can matter far more than people think. Because muscle is one of the best places for glucose to go. When you walk after dinner, your muscles start pulling glucose out of the bloodstream more efficiently. That can blunt the post-meal spike. It can shorten the time your body stays in that exaggerated after-meal state. And it can help reduce the size of the metabolic heat your vessels are dealing with. When you don't move, the opposite tends to happen. And this is why that matters more at night. During the daytime, people at least have a chance of interrupting sitting. They walk to the kitchen. They run errands, they get up for work. They move around more naturally. But after dinner, many people shift into their longest unbroken sitting block of the entire day. Dinner, TV, phone, chair, bed. That means the biggest meal is often followed by the least movement. And for the arteries, that's a bad trade. Now I want to be careful here. I'm not saying that sitting down after dinner one time ruins your arteries. That would be nonsense. The real problem is the pattern. A night here and there is not the issue. A nightly routine that repeatedly combines a substantial evening meal with near total inactivity is the issue. That is how ordinary habits become vascular habits. Not dramatically, quietly. This is also why some people wake up feeling heavier, puffier, more inflamed, and more sluggish than they think they should. They blame age. They blame poor sleep. They blame hormones. They blame stress. And again, sometimes those things matter. But sometimes the truth is much more mechanical than emotional. They are ending the day with the worst possible metabolic sequence. Eat a calorie-dense dinner. Sit for hours. maybe snack again, then sleep. That pattern doesn't just affect the scale, it affects the bloodstream. And this is where the title makes sense. Because if your blood vessels are dealing with a larger and longer post-meal glucose response, a larger and longer triglyceride response, and less movement-driven cleanup, then yes, in a practical sense, you are keeping the arteries under more stress all evening and into the night. Not because the body stops at midnight, because the body keeps processing what you gave it. Now let's talk about the second part most people never hear. The danger is not only sugar. A lot of people know dessert can spike blood sugar. That part is familiar. But fatty dinners matter too. A rich dinner, especially one high in saturated fat and low in fiber, can create a prolonged postprandial lipemia response. In plain English, that means fats keep circulating in the bloodstream for hours. When that happens on top of sitting, the vascular system stays in a more stressful state longer. So this is not just about sugar. It's about post-meal traffic, sugar traffic, fat traffic, inflammatory traffic, oxidative stress traffic. And the arteries are sitting in the middle of all of it. That's why people who only focus on calories often miss the bigger point. You can eat a dinner that technically fits your calories and still create a lousy vascular night if the meal is heavy, late and followed by stillness. And if you are over 50, pre-diabetic, insulin-resistant, carrying extra visceral fat, or already dealing with blood pressure issues, that matters even more. Because the more metabolically fragile the body already is, the less margin you have for this type of nightly routine. This is where people get fooled. They say, but I walk in the morning. That's good. Morning walking is great. But it doesn't erase what your body is doing every single night after dinner. The same is true for the person who says, I work out 3 times a week. That's also good. But structured exercise does not fully cancel out long, repeated post-dinner inactivity, if that is the pattern you live in every day. That sounds small, but it matters. Because there are 2 separate questions here. Do you exercise? And what do you do after dinner? Those are not the same question. Now here is the part one thing many viewers will remember. The most dangerous after-dinner habit is not a dramatic one. It is not smoking a cigar in a dark room. It is not eating 3 cheesecakes. It is not some shocking behavior. It is something much more ordinary. You eat, then collapse. That's it. You signal the end of the day by shutting movement down completely right after the biggest meal. And because it feels relaxing, comforting, and deserved, it becomes automatic. But the body doesn't interpret it emotionally. The body interprets it physiologically. And physiologically, dinner followed by immobility is a worse sequence than most people think. Now I also want to mention something important. This habit often comes with a second hidden problem, late night grazing. Because once a person is parked on the couch after dinner, food often doesn't actually stop at dinner. A few chips, a little chocolate, a sweet drink, a bowl of ice cream, some popcorn, a healthy snack. Now the body is not just processing dinner, it is processing dinner plus the extra things that came after it, while the person remains motionless the entire time. That's how one bad habit quietly recruits another. And this is one reason the vascular system never really gets a break before sleep. So what should happen instead? Not a workout, not punishment, not a rule that you must march around for an hour. The smarter fix is simpler than that. After dinner, move on purpose. Take a 10 to 20 minute walk. Walk around the block. Walk inside the house if you have to. Clean up standing. Stay lightly active instead of collapsing immediately. That small shift changes the whole meaning of the meal. Now the meal is followed by muscular activity. Now the glucose curve can come down more efficiently. Now the vessels are dealing with a smaller metabolic shock. Now the body ends the evening in a more favorable rhythm. And that is the key point. You are not trying to burn off dinner. You are trying to change how the body handles dinner. That is a very different goal. And it is much more realistic. Because most people do not need an extreme solution here. They need an interruption. An interruption to the post-dinner stillness. An interruption to the automatic couch routine. An interruption to the idea that nighttime is only for sitting. One more thing matters here. If someone hears this and thinks, so sitting is evil, that is not what I'm saying. Rest is normal. Relaxation is normal. Sitting is part of life. The problem is not sitting by itself. The problem is sitting immediately after dinner for long uninterrupted stretches, night after night, especially when dinner is heavy and late. That is the real target. And it is such a useful target because it's one of the rare habits that is both common and fixable. You may not change your whole health overnight. You may not reverse years of vascular aging in a week. You may not repair every artery with one walk. But you can absolutely stop making the same after-dinner mistake that keeps your body handling dinner the hard way. And for many people, that one change does more than they expect. Less heaviness after meals, better glucose handling, less late-night sluggishness, sometimes better sleep, and over time a healthier vascular pattern. That is the part most people miss. The body doesn't only remember what you ate, it remembers what you did after you ate. So if I had to reduce this entire script to one line, it would be this. Stop ending dinner with complete stillness, because what may be stressing your arteries all night is not just the meal, but the motionless hours that follow it. And once you understand that, the fix becomes a lot clearer. Don't just eat better, move after dinner.